What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Tape. TJ Wengert here with you, the lead NFL draft analyst for 32 Beat Writers. Been a long time since we had an episode of Beyond the Tape, so let me be the last one to wish you Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and of course, Happy New Year as we head into 2026. And even on that note, real quick, I know why you're here. We're getting into our first two-round mock draft of the 2026 draft cycle. But real quick, before we hit on that, one, Happy New Year, but also this is a great time to go ahead and join the 32 Beat Writers. One, you can subscribe to us here on YouTube, follow us on X. You can also follow myself as well as Z, our lead fantasy analyst, but also on our website over at 32beatwriters.com. I highly encourage you to go ahead and subscribe. I know not everyone's into subscriptions, but Z's Fantasy Insight, we're also going to be starting as of this week. We're going to be starting live prospect breakdowns with me in our Discord. It's going to be a lively bunch. It's going to be a lot of really fun back and forth about these prospects, what we like, what we don't like, who's the right fit for them, things of that nature. So great time to go ahead and jump in to dive into deeper draft conversations. And then, of course, like I said, Z is a fantasy wizard. I'm not ashamed to admit it. Won one of my fantasy leagues, got to another championship in large part because of how he helped me throughout the year with trades, waiver suggestions, things like that. So he's a resource I lean on, and I would highly encourage you. He in and of himself is honestly probably worth the 32 Beat Writer subscription cost. So did want to plug that. Go ahead and subscribe over to the YouTube, to our website, as well as the YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. And of course, like I said, live prospect breakdown starting this week. We are going to put the first one up on YouTube, I do believe. So you'll be able to see that first one, get a little bit of a taste for it, but then we're going to be doing that weekly in our Discord. All right. With all that said, let's jump into why you're here. And that is, of course, because we have our first two-round mock draft of the 2026 cycle. First 18 picks, this is the draft order, barring trades and whatnot that will eventually come our way. So we kick things off with the Las Vegas Raiders. I will have Fernando Mendoza be the first overall pick. If I do get word that Dante Moore is coming out, and it feels like, depending on where you look, it's this way or it's that way, and it kind of conflicting reports out there. If he's in this class, he'll probably be my QB1, just because I'll chase the upside of Moore versus Mendoza. But look, Mendoza won the Heisman. I do think there is a high floor. He does bring not the lowest of ceiling, not like a Kenny Pickett type of situation where the floor is the ceiling or anything like that. This is a guy that in plenty of drafts would go number one overall. In a lot of ways, I think I'm gonna have a higher grade on Mendoza than Cam Ward, but the process isn't done yet, so I don't want to say that until we get to April. But as of right now, I would have, if you put Cam Ward, Mendoza in the same draft, I think I would lean towards Mendoza there. But that's also tricky. It's a upside versus floor argument in and of itself. Same thing we're talking about with Moore versus Mendoza. So my QB1 at the moment, I would put the flag on Dante Moore. But that being said, totally understand why Fernando Mendoza is kind of the consensus number one overall pick right now, winning the Heisman. Could totally see where Brady loves this guy, wants to have him be, the pillar of the Raiders organization. And now everything between now and April is about getting a head coach that is, whether it's Mendoza or Moore, it's all about getting the head coach that's going to maximize them and how close they can work with their second year now GM John Spytek. So an exciting time for the Raiders. I'm actually really pumped. Not a Raiders fan, but I am pumped to see them get the number one overall pick. Feels like the break they've been kind of waiting to get the last couple of years. And then that brings us to the New York Jets. So obviously, like I said, if Dante Moore goes one, this would then be Mendoza. But since we had Mendoza go one, let's have it be Dante Moore. This would probably be the guy that, if I'm picking 101, this would be the guy I'm taking. I think he's the best pure passer in this class. Love the mobility that he's showcased down the stretch here with Oregon. I know we had the pick last week in the college football playoff quarterfinal, but other than that one pick, I thought it was a really solid performance. But this next weekend, Mendoza versus Moore 2.0, it's going to be really fun to watch these two teams. And that game in and of itself against a very disciplined and well-coached defensive unit there at Indiana, that could be the game to decide more. Am I going back to school, or am I going to come out and declare? Ultimately, I didn't think he threw two picks against Indiana when they met in the regular season. Those two picks, to me, had reasons why they happened. They weren't all on Dante Moore. To me, that game was not a Dante Moore loss. It was just Indiana was a better football team, went to Eugene, and showed the Ducks what's up. So I'm curious to see it now that these two teams get to go head-to-head a second time. And then that brings us to the Cardinals. So also, while we're here and talking about these mock drafts, I am going to hit on some breaking NFL news. I'd love to cover it in and of itself, but there's no guarantee what that one singular video would do here on the channel. But if you do want to hear my thoughts on the coaching carousel, who's been fired, GM hires, and potential head coaching candidates, I did used to do that over on my personal YouTube channel. Actually, we're posting this mock on my personal YouTube channel. Hi, everyone. Haven't talked to you in a while. But if you do want to see that, I'd love to hear that down below in the comment section, and maybe I can make some time for it because I do like ranking the head coaching openings and ranking the head coaching hires. But anyways, all that to say, Jonathan Gannon is out. I do like Monty Austin-Forth as a GM, so I'm excited to see him get another swing of the bat. And overall, I think Monty's done a good job building the roster. It's just it's frustrating with how it ended with Gannon, because I think I've been kind of one of his bigger supporters after a weird, they hired this guy. His opening press conference was kind of strange. The things he's saying to Rondell Moore, what's going on? Is this guy a robot? But he's actually, I felt like, out-coached, and they've outplayed expectations until you get to the back half this year, and that defense just withered away. And he's a defensive-minded guy. That's gonna be a poor reflection of him. So I do think I could have been convinced either way, to be honest, just because I did hold out some hope that Gannon could turn around, get the chance to get his quarterback. But that being said, I understand organizationally where Arizona is looking. So they're going to get a new head coach, probably someone who's offensive-minded, right? That just tends to be the flip-flop. You go Cliff Kingsbury, now we're going to hire a defensive guy with Gannon. Now we're going to probably swing back in the other direction, but I am curious to see where they go. But here for the number 3 overall pick, and this is tough because this is a draft class that doesn't have insane top-end talent. But look, the best non-quarterback in this class, I think, is Sonny Styles. And again, haven't finalized it. Still have rechecks to do on all these position rankings. We're going to be going down to Mobile at the end of January. We have the Combine. Hopefully, we're going to 2 weeks after that. There's still a whole lot that I'm going to figure out and piece out and where these rankings are going to land. But, dude, Sonny Styles is legit, man. I mean, he's got the coverage feel of a former safety. And I still think he can get a little bit better. But for a college linebacker, all things considered, he's one of the better guys in coverage. For what you're going to see, but he also literally just missed his first tackle of the season this last weekend. It took extra football. It took a playoff game for him to eventually miss his first tackle this season, but sideline to sideline range. They're even using him a little bit more in that game this last weekend where he was lining up off the edge and actually blitzing from the middle as well. So even starting to see him a little bit more as a pass rusher as well too, but he's rock solid against the run. Safety background, I feel very confident with him in coverage. I know it's a linebacker here at 3, but to me, he's the best non-quarterback on the board. At least as I see it right now, a very good argument could go that it's Ruben Bain or Arvell Reese, the other linebacker there from Ohio State. But here for the Tennessee Titans, I'm going to go Ruben Bain Jr. I'm in a group chat with the draft professors. Actually did a show and a 32-team mock draft with them this last week. So go check that out if you're looking for a 32-teamer with everyone kind of having a team that they're responsible for. And that was a fun exercise. And we did 3 rounds. So if you're looking to get into a deep dive, 100 picks or so to go through there. But a lot of the guys in that group chat over this weekend after Miami's win last Friday, everyone starts talking about, man, get this guy to Tennessee. And it's hard not to get pumped up about the prospects of a defensive line that features Jeffrey Simmons coming off a career year, Tavondre Sweat, who's a very good football player when he's out there, and then Ruben Bain Jr. Hello. Like, that is a pass rush that is going to get home. And Sweat, who's a great run defender and a nose tackle, and Simmons, who's this fantastic 3-tech. And then Bain comes in and he's really bendy. So you want to play him on the edge because that's one of the best skill sets he has, but also shorter arm length. Not that it really totally matters, but his power, that plays on the inside. And really, I jumped into a conversation between Mike Renner, John Ledyard, and Jordan Reed on Twitter last week when talking about Bain. And everything that they listed out, Jordan was talking about his build-up speed. Mike was talking about his power, and Ledyard was talking about actually his pure play strength, I think. But I was like, dude, all 3 of those things I hear, and this guy's going to be an absolute weapon on stunts and twists, whether it's, DE or TE, whoever's setting the first movement, this guy coming in behind it with his build-up speed, his play strength, and his bendability, and his, just overall flexibility, this guy can be an absolute weapon for the gamesmanship you can run up front. So specifically on that D-line where you have 2 other studs, sign me up for that. But there's still a lot to be figured out there with Tennessee. Also another team that's looking for a head coach, and you would have to assume they're probably going to go after an offensive-minded guy. All right, speaking of offense, the next couple of picks are all going to be offensive-minded here. Giants, I'm going to give them to Jordyn Tyson. To me, he's still receiver 1. I get it. The injuries are definitely a concern, and I'm really curious, especially if we get to go to Combine. I want to know the buzz around his medical, because he's missed close to like 40% or somewhere thereabout of his games in his career, which is definitely alarming. Shoulder, knee, as well as I'm trying to think of the third injury, shoulder, knee, and then there was maybe a head injury. But it's not been one chronic, hey, this guy keeps battling with the right knee. The right knee's always there. He's had, a variety of things that have kind of banged him up. It was a knee injury, I believe. And then, the shoulder injury that kept him out of the college football playoff last year. So I just need to know where the medical stands there. But when he's on the field, sharp route runner, the hands got exponentially better. That was a huge talking point coming into the season. Oh, he's got an over 8% drop rate. Well, that's now down below 2%. He's had 1 drop this year. Yes, he's missed games, but just 1 drop this year. So love the route running. The hands are shored up. A guy who can win at all 3 levels, but even be a little bit of a yards after the catch threat. sign me up for that. I think this is the complement to Malik Neighbors the Giants desperately need. Then Wan'Dale Robinson fully slides into that slot role. Things start looking really nice. Plus Theo Johnson, plus Tyrone Tracy's a pass catcher, and Cam Scatterbu coming off injury. All of a sudden, it looks like a pretty good situation for the Giants. All right, and then that takes us to another team that's going to take a wide receiver here, the Cleveland Browns, and I'm totally content where if you're a Giants fan, you're like, no, Tate's way better. I want Tate. Just flip these 2 picks in your mind, and all will be well. But Carnell Tate here in State, the Browns like drafting these Ohio State guys, so it totally checks out. And, Cedric Tillman, he just had what I thought he maybe could be coming out of Tennessee. Kind of saw him as the day 2 guy. And he's had some games in some moments, but it's been inconsistent. I think Carnell Tate, this gives you that X-alpha number 1 wide receiver of the future. And we're not going to go quarterback with any of the picks here for the Browns. Just, they won themselves out of what's going to probably be a 2 quarterback draft, at least for the top 10, I would say. It's a 2 quarterback top 10. And they played themselves out of it by winning down the stretch. And that's probably a good and bad thing for Browns fans, depending on what part of the fan base they fall on. So, yeah, you roll into next year with Shedeur Sanders. And we'll see where it goes with the new head coach. And we're going to give him Carnell Tate. We're going to go offensive line with our next pick. So we're going to at least try to build around that infrastructure to try to see what we can get out of Shedeur Sanders in year 2. All right, Commanders, you're next up. I'm going to go Arvell Reese here. I mean, you got a couple of old linebackers. Frankie Louvu, who is still a really interesting piece, but getting up there in age. And then Bobby Wagner, who's still, just a lifer, and a first ballot Hall of Famer. But his age is starting to show as well. So Arvell Reese, for me, it's you watch how the Commanders use Frankie Louvu. And specifically during the middle of the season with how Ohio State was deploying Reese, specifically more getting him opportunities to rush the passer off the edge and from the middle. It's hard not to see Frankie Louvu when you look at him. And I also had a Frankie Louvu comp on Jalen Walker last year, so I hate to go back to the well here, especially considering Reese is a much longer, bigger, more powerful player than Jalen Walker is. But Jalen Walker had the speed and the bend and kind of the sideline to sideline lateral quicks that Reese definitely has. Reese has sick closing speed, might I add, to go with it. But Reese is more built like Leo Chenal than he is a Jalen Walker. But love the hybrid flexibility you could use with this guy. And the fact that Dan Quinn has tapped into using Frankie Louvu and a little bit of this, a little bit of that, I think he would already have a role in place basically here for Arvell Reese. And it's a defense that needs to get younger, more athletic, and more violent. Reese checks all those boxes. To the New Orleans Saints here at 8, I'm going to go Makai Lemon. Obviously, this last week, Chris Olave missed the game with blood clots, and he's a great football player. We're starting to get close to that age 30 mark, and the concussions in his background, in and of itself, despite how great this year was, he's, we're already kind of dealing with maybe not red flags, but yellow flags for Chris Olave, and maybe some extra receiver depth would be a good thing just in case he does get another concussion, blood clots come back up, whatever the situation may be. But even if all the injuries and all that stuff agnostic, just on field, Chris Olave, what he does well, complements perfectly to Makai Lemon. Makai Lemon's not going to run this sub 4.40 and electric field stretcher. He is a guy who does not get tackled where he catches the football, and he makes tough grabs over the middle of the field and can be a combatant on the sidelines as well. But naturally, this is a, behind the line of scrimmage to 20 yards down the field type of guy. And Chris Olave doesn't really give you a whole lot after the catch, but he's a great intermediate route runner, and he's absolutely got the speed and the route running prowess to attack down the field. So I think these are a perfect 1-2 punch. Olave is the field stretcher. Lemon eating up in the underneath and intermediate spaces with the openings opened by Olave. 1-2 punch. And there's another team that kind of played themselves out of QB contention, right? They had the number 2 pick. We'd probably be looking at quarterbacks here and at least talking about it. They played themselves out of that spot. And Tyler Shuck, to me, quarterback 3, I know I'm a little biased. I liked him a lot last draft cycle, or, a lot for that quarterback class. But that said, I think he's earned the opportunity to go into next year as a starter. And I think Makai Lemon makes his life that much easier. All right, let's get to the Kansas City Chiefs here at 9. This pick I know is going to be confrontational, and Chiefs fans, let me know what you think about it. Jeremiah Love here. The last first-round running back was obviously a bust, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And you took him at 32, let alone taking him here at top 9. I will say the difference there is CEH to me really was a luxury pick, and it felt like we looked at the Chiefs roster as this complete masterpiece, and now they're just going to throw a cherry on top. I think we are more aware of the Chiefs' shortcomings now, and I think you can address that later rounds, but also throughout free agency. But this is also a team that I think has become more acutely aware of their need to bolster that running game. And you saw that with Brashard Smith. Yes, they took him in the 7th round, but down the stretch, they wanted to get him more opportunities to run. He is a more explosive runner than someone like a Kareem Hunt, and even more so than Isaiah Pacheco in my mind. But really what I think Pacheco brings, plus Brashard Smith, you almost get that as a hybrid player here at Jeremiah Love, who's going to be an electric tester, bring that big playability, but also can run with violence and run through someone. Maybe not quite to the level of Pacheco, but I mean, Love's not afraid to lower his shoulder and go through a guy, but he's also not afraid to hurdle over someone because he's that level of an athlete. And this year at Notre Dame, they utilized him. I say we almost there because I'm a Notre Dame fan. But the Fighting Irish utilized him more as a pass catcher this year more than they ever have. So even that part of his game is starting to grow and expand. So he's going to be a blue chipper for me. Don't know how many others they're going to be. So that's part of why I was like, look, I know last first round running back didn't work out, but CEH wasn't a blue chipper. Here you're getting a blue chipper at 9. And again, it's a draft that doesn't have great high-end talent. And now one of them fell to you at 9. Same can be said about Caleb Downs, another one of these guys who's almost assuredly going to be a blue chipper for me, but he's a safety. Where do you want to take him? And right now I feel a little bit better about the Chiefs defense and the back end. Still can maybe use a corner, but I felt, I think there's a bigger upgrade for Love over, as much as I love Brashard Smith. Love plus Smith is your long-term backfield, to me, is a bigger net win than like Downs plus some of the other guys they have on the back end there. But I totally understand the argument. So Chiefs fans, let me know. Would you go Caleb Downs? Would you go David Bailey? I'd be really curious to hear where you're thinking here. 9 overall. Kenyon Sadiq, is that the move if Kelsey retires? I'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, speaking of Downs, that's going to be the pick here for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's just one of the best players in the draft. And look, this is a defense that needs floor raisers, guys who don't miss tackles, guys who won't be in the middle of a coverage bust, and a guy that on top of that could match up with running backs, tight ends, give you some more flexibility. And really, as much as those linebackers are young, tight ends and running backs really gave them the work down the stretch. And I think Caleb Downs gives you an immediate upgrade there as a tight end eraser, running back out of the backfield, matchup guy. On top of, again, he just doesn't miss tackles. You can play him in the box. You can play him over the top. You're starting to see his range and athleticism in the latter stages of the regular season come into play. Got to have that interception from a single high look. And I think they're second to last game. I have to double check the schedule. But down the stretch, you got to see more of the single high looks. So at this point, I've seen it all from Caleb Downs, and I like everything that I see. And again, the Bengals, this is a rough defense. Anybody who raises the floor of it, they should be welcome to the squad with open arms. All right, Miami Dolphins, you're next up here at 11. We're actually going to have consecutive corners come off the board. To me, Jermon McCoy is still the best corner in the class. His 2024-25 tape would be the best of anybody in this group if he played this year and if that tape was for this season. And he never played another down. It sounds like he's been medically cleared, but then him and Tennessee both kind of came to an understanding of, look, we're not going to the Natty. You're going to be a first-round pick. I think this works out for both of us. If you don't play, you go ahead and make your money at the next level. And he won't be the only Tennessee corner we have go here in the first round. But it's the blend of size, athleticism, and refined technique, man. I think Jermon McCoy brings it all to the table. So for a team that desperately needs a number one shutdown corner, and look, I know Jack Jones had some moments, and he's had the tweets, oh, shouldn't have cut me, Las Vegas, all that sort of stuff. And he's a good player. He has his games, but I think game in and game out, down in and down out, Jermon McCoy is a more consistent player than Jack Jones. So, and in general, even outside of Jack Jones, like they just need more corner help in general in Miami. Hats off to Anthony Weaver, though. He did a great job down the stretch, just band-aiding up that defense, specifically on the back end. But as I previously said, we're going to stay at the cornerback position for the Cowboys. They just moved on from Trayvon Diggs. Already, I thought outside corner could be a spot where they could go in the draft. So, boom, here's Mansour Delane. I don't think the 40 is going to be anything that's super sexy, but really light on his feet, really refined player from a coverage standpoint, both man and zone, on and off. So I'm willing to live with some of those limitations in the long speed department because I just don't think he's going to let you get behind him with what he could do at the line of scrimmage, and also just being able to play to a set location, right? And you're starting to see that more and more, and that's part of why I do think his long speed concerns would be kind of a perfect fit for him in Minnesota. But I've done that in a lot of mocks. But like you even saw it this last weekend for Minnesota corners where they're playing to a certain depth because they know the pass rush is going to get there. And I almost think, again, Delane, that would be a perfect hand and glove fit. But I do think some of that is true in Dallas as well, depending on what they do with the DC position, because I would be floored to see Matt Eberflus there as the DC next year. Who knows? Maybe I've already missed that news. But Mansour Delane, number one corner on the outside that I think they just, at this point, they have got to address. They have moved on from too many of these guys not to go ahead and add to that position. All right, the Rams are next up here at 13. I'm going to go with Francis Maui-Noah or CC Maui-Noah, whichever you prefer. But CC Maui-Noah, whether it's right tackle or right guard. But here, specifically for the Rams, Rob Havenstein getting a little long in the tooth. His play starting to take a step in the wrong direction. I think you plug and play Maui-Noah there at guard, at right tackle. He does, to me, his skill sets are very guard-like, and even his build is very guard-like. But I think the arm length is going to be just long enough to where let's just let it play out at right tackle, and worst comes to worst, by year 3, you move him inside the guard, and he'll be an ass kicker there. So no matter what, he'll be a starter for the Rams somewhere on that defensive line. But I think right away, let's give him the chance to start at right tackle. Let's move on from Havenstein, get younger, cheaper at that position. And now we know a very even, PFF grade for zone and gap. Rams are becoming this more and more gap-heavy team, specifically in the red zone. So I do think he fits with what they want to do from a blocking scheme standpoint. All right, next up, the Baltimore Ravens. They have Peter Woods fall right into their lap. And Travis Jones, he played more 3-tech than he did nose tackle this year, but his body type is still very nose tackle-ish. And with Justin Madubuike, no guarantee he ever comes back. I think I even saw in the announcement article when he was out for the year that he was contemplating retirement. So, right away, when you're confronted with that as a part of the headline, it's more than likely that he's going to probably hang it up there, and that might be curtains for the career. So, if that's the case, I think Peter Woods steps in and he's your Justin Madubuike fill-in placement. Now, Madubuike is a much better pass rusher than Peter Woods at this point, but Woods, even where it was a disappointing this year for Clemson, and maybe he kind of coasted down the stretch, he's an NFL-ready, day one impact player against the run. And then, I would trust the Ravens. And, I know John Harbaugh's in some hot water right now, but I think he's a great coach. And that's a franchise that has developed players at an exceptional rate. So if there is an entity out there that could get Peter Woods to turn on that and flip that switch as a pass rusher, Clemson couldn't. I think the Baltimore Ravens would be one of those places that could maybe find that extra gear in his game. All right, let's get on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers then at 15. This is where I'm going to have David Bailey come off the board. This team needs more pass rush juice. The Hassan Reddick thing did not work out. Joe Tronchenko doesn't play for this team. He plays in Cleveland. Yaya Diaby has some good games, but it's an up and down experience for him. So, I know he's not a great run defender, David Bailey, but I think he got a little bit better this year. He at least put his nose in the fight a little bit more frequently than he did at Stanford. He bulked up a little bit, but just from a pass rush standpoint, this is a dude, absolutely best pure pass rusher from an edge position and a true edge, right? Bain's going to be this tweener, is the inside-outside kind of guy. Love him on stunts and twists. Let's get him on the inside. Bailey, edge rusher through and through, stand-up outside linebacker in your old school 3-4 terms. That's this dude, and he absolutely fits in with Todd Bowles, what he wants to do. And also, Todd Bowles is going to keep that job beyond this next coaching cycle. That pass rush better start hitting home, and those blitzes better start hitting home, and this is the guy that will help make that happen. All right, let's get on to the New York Jets. We'll go back to the receiver well here and go with Denzel Boston. Probably about as early as I've seen him come off the board as Bear decides to join us here for the mock draft. But probably as high as you'll see him go in one of these mocks. And part of that is he's just not going to have a grade 40. He's not going to be this low 4.4, sub 4.4 blazer or anything like that. But outside of that, dude, this guy is a technically refined, NFL ready, ex-receiver, possession guy. Put him on the line of scrimmage, let him face press coverage, let him work the sideline, take advantage of his body control. And where he isn't this phenomenal straight line athlete, he's going to wow you with the 40. He's a very fluid and capable athlete. And I think you see that functionality with him after the catch where he's just elusive enough and he's just fast enough and just slippery enough. And he falls forward given his big frame. So I do think he's an efficient player after the catch as well, on top of what you're going to get with the possession X route tree. And this is just a Jets receiver room that needs more physicality. And as much as Garrett Wilson can play X, think about life with him getting a head start at the snap because he's the flanker, or him going against maybe a team's worst corner out of the slot. I think by having a sacrificial X, if you want to call it that, if Denzel Boston is nothing more than Romeo Doubs, I think that in and of itself frees up Garrett Wilson to have that much better of a season, be that much more efficient, and let you do that much more with him from a Tanner Engstrand, the Jets OC standpoint. So that in and of itself, I think is a value you could argue is worth pick 16, but I also think Denzel Boston's a great football player and brings the physicality this team just doesn't have right now. All right, let's go on to pick number 17. Saw a lot of reports coming into the season or coming into week 18 that this might be Taylor Decker's last game as a Detroit Lion. And if that is the case, Caleb Lomu, fell right into your lap. And this is to me, an NFL-ready pass protector, as much as you're going to get in this class where the tackle group isn't awesome. But, man, he's got it from a movement skill standpoint, the hand placement. He's never overwhelmed either, other than maybe that first Texas Tech game. But even that one, when you look at most offensive tackles against Texas Tech, they know they don't have a shot. Lomu, he wasn't quite that overworked or overwhelmed, but it's probably the spottiest game of his tape so far, and that's to be expected against two NFL edge rushers and Romello Height and David Bailey. But yeah, if Decker's not going to be a Lion next year, let's keep a strength of strength. That offensive line's as big a part of the Detroit Lions turnaround as I would argue Dan Campbell and Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown. As much as Jameer Gibbs, as much as these other guys are a big part of it, that offensive line is a big key to success as well. So let's keep a strength of strength, and let's add Caleb Lomu in the place of Caleb Decker. We get to the Minnesota Vikings. Again, this would have been an awesome Mansour Delane fit, but instead I'm going to go to a different corner, go with Avion Terrell. In a lot of ways, I think Isaiah Rodgers is on a 2-year deal, so I apologize if that's not right. But just imagine a younger, cheaper version of kind of what Isaiah Rodgers brings to the table as a run defender. And, of course, he has the crazy 99.9 perfect game from PFF this year. But, Avion Terrell forces five fumbles last year, 8 over the last 2 years. But he's also a guy who's going to test well, who's also very elegant in his movement skills, being able to turn his hips, flip his hips, and go downfield and keep up with the wide receiver, but also the ability to decel and stop on a dime and keep up with comeback routes. He's also very agile and can keep up with in-breaking routes. So really refined coverage player. He's just 5'11", 180, so you just kind of wonder outside or inside. To me, it's probably more on the inside, but they already kind of use Byron Murphy as this inside-outside guy, so they probably already have a place in mind kind of where they could play Terrell. But I think his tackling ability and just his ability to create some chaos and some turnovers fits in really well with Brian Flores. Again, would have loved Mansour Delane here, but Avion Terrell I also think is a very Brian Flores-esque type of corner, assuming he's back as a defensive coordinator. All right, pick 19. I'm going back to the linebacker well for the Panthers. I've done this in a lot of mocks, but I'm going to go C.J. Allen. Thought about Josiah Trotter. He's going to go in the top 50 in this mock. Linebacker from Missouri. I'm a big Josiah Trotter fan. Really like his game. But him and Allen are very comparable players where like the coverage aspect of their game leaves some room to be desired. But man, these guys playing downhill, both very instinctual and both very violent. So I think Allen might be a slightly better tester. But he's also 6'1", 235, which probably signals that he's 6'1", 230 more likely. And Trotter's listed a little bit taller, a little bit bigger. So I am going to be curious to see where the final measurables come in for those two guys and ultimately where the testing numbers go too. But yeah, I'm going to go with C.J. Allen here. I think this is just like the instinctive downhill linebacker they don't have right now. Still a little bit of a TBD from the coverage standpoint where I think they can get better, but this is a big improvement to me over the middle linebacking core that they have currently in Carolina. All right. Back to the Dallas Cowboys. This is where I'm going to have Keldrick Folk come off the board. We went corner first time around. Now we're going to give him that early down edge that really, in a perfect world, he's 3 down edge. But, we'll see. At the worst, Keldrick Folk's going to be a lights out run defender on early downs. And then you'll kind of bite your time with what you're going to get from the pass rush standpoint on obvious passing situations. They also have a couple guys that could kind of rotate in, right? Like Sam Williams flanking in as that, DPR specialist. Even this could be an opportunity to get Dominant Azaraku off the field in early downs where he's definitely a more efficient pass rusher than he is run defender at this current point in his career. So a lot of different options there with how you rotate these guys in. But I do think their run defense still needs one more guy specifically on the edge. And I think Keldrick Folk brings that to the table. All right, to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And again, I said this is probably a 2-quarterback class, specifically in the top 10. I do think and there was a report coming out today that it sounds likely that Ty Simpson will declare, but he's kind of left without any great options. To me, the best bet might be going to Tennessee, but also then you're stuck with the Josh Heupel offense clouding your evaluation next year. So I don't think Alabama's going to bring him back. I think they want to turn the keys over to Keelan Russell. So very curious situation for Ty Simpson. But if he does declare, I do think he's going to go round 1. Whether it's the Steelers here because of a desperate need, right? Like Rodgers, as great as that Week 18 comeback was, one last 2-minute drive, all that was cool. You can't go into next year with Aaron Rodgers as your starting quarterback. I mean, like age just caught up to what is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But then, do you want to kick the tires on Kyler Murray and pick up that contract? Do you want to take the flyer on Malik Willis? Feels like he's going to have a lot of suitors between Miami and Arizona and maybe even Minnesota in the mix. So I don't know if Pittsburgh really stands out as the guys who are going to win that bidding war. So I don't know. And then even if it's not the Steelers, you look at some of these other teams back into the first round, specifically this team here at 29 could be looking for a quarterback in the future. Why not take Ty Simpson there? So I don't know. I think if he does declare, which kind of sounds like he is being forced into that decision, I think he goes round 1. And for Pittsburgh, look, it's not going to be Rodgers next year. So who's he going to be? And I do think there would be something where it's a Ty Simpson in the draft after you already did X, Y, and Z move in free agency. Now, whether that's, oh my God, we brought in Kirk Cousins after the Falcons cut him, or they made the trade for Mac Jones. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. I'm just throwing out veteran options. But I think there's going to be something in the offseason that is a veteran move. And then if Ty Simpson's there at 21, wouldn't shock me whatsoever if they do go in that direction and draft him as the guy of the future. I do worry about his arm throwing in the cold, and December, January wind and overall atmosphere of not only Pittsburgh, but Cleveland and Baltimore. That's hell, Cincinnati got cold a couple times this year too. It's a tough division to not have an A+ arm, but I do think Simpson has enough of an arm to make it work. He has a better arm than Kenny Pickett. So, all things considered, it's not as bad as it could be as a Steelers fan. Anyways, let's leave that point. Let's talk about the LA Chargers. Little bit of an unorthodox pick here. I'm going to go Spencer Fano. One, because he's here at 22, and even where it wasn't the lights out top 10, top 5 pick type of year that I thought Spencer Fano might have, Fano, he still had a very good year and is still worthy of being a first round pick. and certainly should probably go higher than 22. And for the Chargers, in a year where you've had Slater go down, Alt go down, a guy who plays tackle in college is probably appealing. But also that right guard spot's been a bit of a headache for them all year long. And I think Fano, just given the fact that he's listed at 308 right now, he's probably lighter than that. And he'll show up to the combine and probably get to the legit 308. But there's going to be some arm length conversations to be had about him. But overall weight is going to come into the play as well. So wouldn't shock me whatsoever if he just continues to bulk up and move inside to play guard. And if he does, I think he would be a really good run impact player for that Greg Roman scheme that wants to get downhill and light people up. And Spencer Fano in the run game will light fools up, especially if you continue to ask him to bulk up. So just throwing this out as tackle contingency, but right guard of the future situation here for the LA Chargers. But I'd also have to brush up on the Mekhi Becton contract, see how many years left on Zion Johnson's deal there is. But thought the value was really good there at 22. So Chargers fans, let me hear your thoughts. Eagles then at 23. And I mean, this was one that I almost let slip by me when I was preparing this, but then I was like, oh, wait a minute. Dallas Goedert, he's going to be hitting free agency, right? And if that's the case, dude, I mean, Kenyon Sadiq falling to your lap at 23, this is fantastic. And at the end of the day, the Eagles want to establish their physicality with the run game. They want to move dudes off the line of scrimmage, right? That was their, as much as Jalen Hurts is awesome, A.J. Brown can take games over for sure. They won a Super Bowl on the back of that offensive line and Saquon Barkley running behind it and then being an absolute menace. You know what helps that offensive line even more? One of the better blocking tight ends we've seen, at the top of the draft. They specifically with what City gives you as a receiver, the fact that he's as good of a blocker as he is rarefied air. So an extension of the offensive line in both the run game, but also pass protection if you really needed it. But also what he gives you from an athletic standpoint, catching the football, yards after the catch. Look at how much this team's done with Dallas Goedert in the red zone. And now think about the athlete that is Kenyon Sadiq, running, catching those shovel passes, being a factor in triple option, working the red zone in general, whether it's just his size, catchability, but also his general movement skills. So whether scheming it up or asking him to win one-on-one, I think he does a lot of what Dallas Goedert does, just as a more athletic version of it. And then he's a better blocker too. So you get younger, cheaper, and honestly, in a lot of ways, a guy who impacts more of the offensive game than Goedert, despite he's been awesome this year, setting a franchise record in touchdowns this year. I understand all that. In some ways, I think there's an even better future if they land a Kenyon Sadiq. All right, Buffalo Bills here at 24. I'm going to go Cassius Howell. Joey Bosa has been a revelation for them. I just don't know how long he can continue to play. So in the event that Bosa is on the free agent market still by the time we get to the draft next April, I think Cassius Howell could step right in and play that Joey Bosa role. I did also think about some of the interior defenders here, Caden McDonald, Caleb Banks, Amari Washington, to get another run defender in that mix. So Bills fans, let me know, what would your preference be? Some more edge rush juice, or getting that kind of run-stopping focused defensive tackle? I'd be curious to hear where you guys are at right about now. All right, next up is the Chicago Bears at 25. This is where I'm going to have Caden McDonald come off the board. Gervon Dexter with a nice stack this last weekend. But, Grady Jarrett getting up there in age, Andrew Billings, same sort of thing. He's more of a run-focused guy anyways. So I'm kind of holding out hope that Gervon Dexter can continue to work forward and try to find a new ceiling from a pass rush standpoint. So I think at minimum, Caden McDonald is like newer, younger, cheaper version of Andrew Billings, because this guy against the run is an absolute force. So, and this could have been Amari Washington too. It just comes down to which one of these D tackles you prefer. Today, I'm feeling Caden McDonald's a fit for the Bears. So this is younger, cheaper Andrew Billings. And then let's hope that there's some ceiling there from a pass rush standpoint. He's a really good athlete. I do think a lot of his pass rush production just comes way of that's a great defense, and there's only so many one-on-ones to go around, or the quarterback's trying to bail out of the pocket. They step up and right into the waiting arms of Caden McDonald. So I think the production's more appealing than the actual pass rush plan and actual pass rush product we have right now in Caden McDonald. But he's an NFL-ready run defender. And given his athletic prowess, I'm not ready to rule out that he could grow into a better pass rusher at the next level. So the Bears get the chance to try to develop that at 25. Next up, San Francisco 49ers at 26. I'm going to give him Casey Concepcion. Maybe the best satellite player in this class outside of Jeremiah Love and Makai Lemon. But it's going to be a fun conversation. Maybe that'll be a video at the end of the year. Best satellite players in the class. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, satellite players are just players you want in space. You can see why that is a term. But Concepcion, one of, if not the best satellite player in this class, now going to an offense with a mastermind of getting his satellite players into space in Kyle Shanahan. I mean, need I say more? Plus, Brandon Ayuk's he's done with the 49ers. Juwan Jennings, an impending free agent. He feels like a guy that if Ayuk goes to Washington, Jennings might go to the Steelers or vice versa. In a lot of ways, both those places make sense for both those guys. So it could be Ricky Pearsall and who else? So if that's the case, that wide receiver room is going to need some reinforcements. Concepcion, I think, is a fantastic fit for Shanahan. All right, back to the Houston Texans for the first time. I'm going to have Vega Ione come off the board here, the guard from Penn State. I think he fits in with the gap scheme stuff, with just enough athleticism to where when they do want to sprinkle in zone, he's not a complete liability. They do more inside zone than outside zone. Previous OC, Bobby Slowick, a lot of outside zone. So with Nick Haley there, I think Ioane is the much better fit. And I do think guard is still one of the few spots on that roster. Right now, that roster is looking really good, right? Like, you got the QB of the future. We're going to go running back later on. Love the receivers, love the corners, love the passer. Like, not that much to nitpick here. It's kind of like D-tackle, which we were going to go with our second pick, linebacker, and then interior offensive line. So I thought the value was best here for Ioane. Thus, he's the pick here at 27 for Houston. Back to the Cleveland Browns. This is where I'm going to have Caden Proctor come off the board, and I have been, throughout this entire cycle, a noted critic of Caden Proctor. Not that I don't think he can't go round one. It's just right now you're drafting Caden Proctor for the traits, not the tape, in my opinion. And the tape got better down this, over the middle portion of the season, I'll say. But then you got to a last couple of games where they started playing some heavy hitters again, and all of a sudden it's not that great. Other than, that last Georgia game, because like Georgia doesn't have a great pass rush, and he held his own there. So still wish the tape had an overall better feel to it. And long term, he might be a guard. But the advantage here for the Browns is, if not this offseason, by next offseason, that will be almost assuredly 5 new starters on that offensive line. It may not happen all in this offseason, but give it 2 years. That is going to be an entirely new offensive line, with maybe one exception being DeJuan Jones. Maybe he's the one guy who sticks through it all. But even that, I'm not willing to fully bet on that. So they need offensive line pieces. They've got to get younger, got to get cheaper, got to get new guys to be pillars of that for the next decade. And Caden Proctor comes with a lot of risk, but he also comes with a lot of tools. And I don't know, now that Brian Callahan's been fired by Tennessee, maybe they can talk Bill Callahan to coming back to Cleveland and coaching that O-line. If that's the case, all of a sudden I'm fully here for these tools and traits going to Bill Callahan. I'd be fully for it if the Browns can make that happen. But that's TBD, obviously. All right, Los Angeles Rams. We went CC Maui-No with that first pick. That's where I'm going to go with the other Tennessee corner, Colton Hood. And part of it is just I keep thinking back to that Eagles-Rams game earlier this year where A.J. Brown just absolutely bodied the Rams in the second half. And this is just the type of corner they don't have. Like, they've done good with Emmanuel Forbes. They've done good with Darius Williams. But they just don't have that long, physical corner right now who's willing to go line of scrimmage. I'm going to put my hands in your chest. Let's duke it out. That's Colton Hood. Like, this guy plays with as good a physicality at the corner position as anybody in this draft class. So I think he's just the blend of corner they don't currently have. So we went offensive line. Now we're going to go to the other side of the ball, go give them some corner reinforcements in Colton Hood. Redshirt sophomore, too, one of the younger guys in this class. Then the New England Patriots here at 30. This is just, there's going to be a lot of mocks. We're going to be doing 1 mock a week moving forward until we get to the actual NFL draft in April. But this is going to be a pick you probably see a lot of. I'm a big Blake Miller guy, the right spot, right? Late first into the second round. I'm a Blake Miller fan. Felt like his play strength finally caught up to the athletic traits he has. You saw it in pass pro, but also he's a great piece in the run game when you're getting these guys out on the move. Now, I know Josh McCown's more gap-oriented than he is zone, but I do think there's a world for some balance there. And I do think, again, the play strength that's finally caught up for Blake Miller to where even in a gap scheme, I don't feel like he's a total liability. Would prefer him in San Francisco, right, than Josh McCown's system in New England, but I think he can hold his own. Morgan Moses getting up there in age. So even that said, you don't have to force Blake Miller into a starting spot if you feel like, hey, he needs another offseason to bulk up. You could run it back with Morgan Moses, who's serviceable. Or you could turn the page and go to a new bookend option there, and hopefully it's Will Campbell, Blake Miller for the next decade, protecting Drake May. All right, next up, Denver Broncos. A bit of a surprise declaration for the NFL draft. Connor Lew, 20 years old, tore his ACL early to mid portions of the season. So a lot of people thought he was going to go back to school and position himself as center 1 in 2027, but he decided to declare. I think part of that is like the center position. I think there's a lot of good guards. There's some appealing centers, but especially with Oregon center Ayapani Lololu going back to school, his plays kind of deteriorated as the year went on. But anyways, he would have been a day 2, early day 3 guy. But the center position kind of still stands out as like needing a dude. And I think even with the injury, even with the tape not being as good this year as it was last year for Lew, he's still probably late first into second round. I'm comfortable taking him. And like right here, like 31, it's almost kind of worked out perfectly with the Broncos being right here at 31. Luke Wattenberg's on IR. In general, I thought that center spot was one of the few weaknesses on that offensive line for Denver. So Lew, plug and play option. He's a good scheme fit. He absolutely bolsters that the middle of that unit tenfold. But this is kind of like, if I'm going to draft Connor Lew in the first round, this is probably the extent of it, 31, 32. He's definitely more of a second round guy, but I do want to note, surprised he declared, but I'm welcoming to the idea because I do think he is a top 50 guy, even with this year being a little bit of a disappointing season. All right, then we get to the Seattle Seahawks. We're going to go back to the interior offensive line, a little bit of an O-line run here. And, Not a lot of great top-end talent, but now we're getting to the bell curve of the draft where there's some really appealing players for the talent of where they are going off the board. And that's going to be Emmanuel Pregnon. Right now he's the left guard for Oregon. I think that's fine with that. Gray Zabel currently plays left guard, but I also saw him at the Senior Bowl, kick ass at center, or at right guard. So Seahawks fans, I throw it to you. Pregnon, I think it's a great scheme fit. He's been awesome in zone blocking this year at Oregon. I do assume Clint Kubiak's going to get a head coaching job, but I've also heard he's not like the most outspoken, like front of the room, rah-rah type of guy. So maybe he's content being an OC. Either way, if they move on from Clint Kubiak because he gets a head coaching job, odds are they're going to get a disciple with a very close scheme to Kubiak just because they're going to maintain Sam Darnold's presence as the quarterback of that team. So it's going to be Kubiak or someone very close. So Pregnon's a scheme fit, and then you either have the choice of Zabel, you're going to play center, and we're going to keep Anthony Bradford out there, or we're going to move Zabel to right guard, and we're going to figure out Ola Oluwatimi or Sullen, which one of these guys is going to be our center of the future. So Seattle fans, let me hear what's your preferred outcome there with Pregnon being the pick there at 32.
It is 32 beat writers season, August, when they can make you a lot of money, especially on a platform like Fast Draft. Doesn't have hundreds of best ball bro killers. So when there's an injury and you hear about it through 32 beat writers, you can run to the Fast Draft app and jump into a Flex 4 game. Just draft any 6 flex players. Top 4 enter your lineup every week. Or the Rabbit, 15-round best ball. Get your quarterback wide receiver stacks, get your running back sleepers. And if you follow 32 beat writers, you can jump into these draft rooms and be like, oh my God, I'm avoiding this guy at all costs, and I'm gobbling up all of this other running back before the larger public is fully aware, has fully digested the ramifications of the information that 32 beat writers is sharing. So go get Fast Draft, type in that code 32BW. 32BW is the code. Get you a $50 deposit match on Fast Draft. Now let's go start drafting faster.
All right, second round time. Let's start flying through these picks. The New York Jets went an entire season without an interception. What? I just had to throw that out there. That's just one of the mind-boggling stats from this season. And while I do really like Brandon Cisse, and he's a physical corner, and I'm not saying he doesn't have a dog in him. Keith Abney has dog in him, and earmuffs. I'm gonna drop an F-bomb here in a second. But he's got the dog in him, and this is a team that just desperately needs someone who will go head-to-head with any player on the field and just feels like they're going to win every fucking rep they have. And that's just their mentality. And I only use the F-bomb there just to emphasize how serious I see that in Keith Abney, where this guy, I'm dominating this rep. I'm the best player on the football field. And at corner, it's a position where you can't win every rep. So you kind of have to have that mentality just because you need to be ready for the next time that ball is going to come your way, the next one-on-one, the next opportunity you have to break a pass up or jump in front of it and make it a pick. He has that mentality. And I feel like his confidence, it's just something that team needs right now. So I'm going to put an absolute dog in that secondary. I'm going to go with Keith Abney, even though it's close between him and Cisse on my board right now. All right, back to the Arizona Cardinals. I'm going to go with Max Ahenachor, the offensive tackle from Arizona State. He's a really intriguing player. Just started kind of playing football more recently. Now in his second year at Arizona State. Really good athlete. There's still work to be done from a technique standpoint, but newer player of the sport. He's a really good athlete, and there's some good tape to be excited about. He probably had as good a tape as any tackle in the country against David Bailey. So like little things like that, plus his athletic profile, give you some hope. And Jonah Williams cannot be the right tackle of the future for the Arizona Cardinals. So Max Ahenachor, I see you as the future right tackle of the Arizona Cardinals. Back to the Tennessee Titans. This one I have Brandon Cisse come off the board. Long physical corner, and the L'Jarius Sneed experiment just didn't work out for Tennessee. So let's add one more boundary corner into the mix there. This one's a really fun one. Vegas Raiders. So obviously we went Fernando Mendoza at 1. I like Jack Bech as a Z slot type. Deontay Thornton's a fun field stretcher, but this team needs a true X receiver, boundary, number 1 guy. Let's get Fernando Mendoza, that guy from Indiana, in Elijah Surratt. So built-in chemistry, but this is the physical X line of scrimmage. Line him up there. Let him deal with press. This is the type of receiver they just don't currently have on the roster. You can say Deontay Thornton plays X, but he's just running wind sprints at that point. I think Surratt is the X. Bech is the Z in the slot. Okay, let's see what fun we can have here with Fernando Mendoza in Sin City. All right, now we get back to the New York Giants, and it's another one of these things where like just the corner position's been disappointing this year. I like Deonte Banks, thought he was worth a first-round pick. It just hasn't really worked out. They also need to change defensive coordinators like nobody's business. But I'm going to go with Chris Johnson here and give him another boundary corner option to move on from Deonte Banks. I know they have Paulson Adebo for 2 more years, I believe, under contract. So Adebo plus Chris Johnson. Cannot wait to see Chris Johnson in the Senior Bowl. Once we get to, and me and Z are going to talk about our guys we're most looking forward to at the Senior Bowl, I guess in about 2 weeks because we're that close to it. this is going to be one of those guys that's in my top 5 defensive players. I cannot wait to see there at the Senior Bowl. He could have a Quinyon Mitchell type of rise, given the performance he could have. And he's a smaller school guy. He's kind of on the bubble. Not everybody knows about him yet, but a really good football player with some really good tape. Nice, body build and frame in general is what I'm trying to say, and a good enough athlete to me. So I think a good showing at Mobile will move him from 37 probably in somewhere into the late teens, into the 20s, maybe even. All right. Anyways, let's get back to the Houston Texans. Again, could have gone with a few different guys here on the defensive interior. I have not done defensive interior rechecks yet. I've just been watching these guys as they've been competing, specifically Miller, Washington, and Lee Hunter. And seriously, dude, I'm cool with all 3 of these guys for DeMeco Ryans. All 3 of these dudes. I'm not really the world's biggest Caleb Banks fan, but Miller, Washington, Hunter, whoever DeMeco Ryan says, I want that one as my nose tackle. Yes. I just think D tackle is one of the few spots where they can continue to get better, not only from a run defense standpoint, but can we find a little extra juice there from a pass rush standpoint? So I kind of want to go Lee Hunter because, man, like they shouldn't move the way he moves at 325. But as it currently stands on my board, Miller is the highest of the bunch. I'm really due to go back and check out Amari Washington and give him a deeper dive because the way some people have talked about him, he might end up being the best of those 3. But all 3 of them are going to come off the board here very soon. Christian Miller there to the Houston Texans. Love him as that run defense focused guy in the middle of the D line, but long limbs. Let's see what we can tap into him from a pass rush standpoint and let DeMeco Ryans work his magic. All right, pick 39, Cleveland Browns. So again, we took Caden Proctor last time out. Starting him at tackle, may eventually be a guard. So that does complicate this just a little bit. But that being said, again, they might be replacing 5 starters as soon as this offseason. If not this offseason, by the end of the next one. By the end of 2027, it's going to be pretty much a whole new offensive line. Again, with one caveat, maybe DeJuan Jones is there. Maybe. So whether Proctor's playing guard, tackle, I'm going to take Chase Bizantis here at 39. To me, he's just the best pass-protecting guard in this class, bar none. Like I like Vega Ioane a lot in pass protection, but I think Bizantis has got to be a little bit there. But I'll go with Bizantis just to lock in that offensive line. And Shedeur Sanders is a guy who's known to hold on to the football, and he's going to try to extend plays and wait for someone to develop down the field. I think Chase Bizantis' pass protection will certainly aid in that endeavor, plus Caden Proctor in the mix, plus whatever you do in free agency. So this is just going to be the steps. And I know Browns fans are not going to be excited. It's not sexy. There's going to be a lot of offensive line picks over the next 2 drafts, but it's how you get back to the days of, oh my God, we have Jack Conklin and Wyatt Teller and all 5 of these guys are kicking ass and we have the best O-line of football. These are the types of steps you have to do to get back to those heights. All right, next up, Kansas City Chiefs here at 40. This is where, again, go back to the D tackle. Well, I'm cool with any pick here for the Chiefs. I seriously am. We already went first round. We went Jeremiah Love. So now we're going the defensive side. Amari Washington would love it. Lee Hunter would love it. But here I thought, I'm not the world's biggest Caleb Banks guy, but there's a lot of people who have him as a top 10 player on the board. So this is just kind of where I disconnect from most people on Caleb Banks. But that being said, if there's a place where he could figure it out and have down in and down out consistency, playing alongside Chris Jones is a great spot to do that. And I will give Caleb Banks one thing. If he's going to become a first-round prospect for me, the number one thing in his scouting report will be his hands. He has as violent and as powerful hands as I've seen any player have. And that is, I no hyperbole there. He has got insane power in his hands. To me, though, he just plays a little too upright too often. So it's just a leverage issue, and plus the injury history. So to me, it's just I would let someone else draft him in the first round. But as the mock drafter here, he has to go somewhere. So I'm going to have him go top 40, go to the Kansas City Chiefs, acknowledge that he's not my type of guy. I would take him later. I'd take Lee Hunter over him for sure here for the Kansas City Chiefs. But did want to put it out there because he's one of a lot of people's favorite players in this year's class, Caleb Banks. Let me know where you stand on Caleb Banks. I'd love to hear that conversation down below. All right, let's get to the Bengals here at 41. And folks, let's just keep doing it. And imagine this draft for the Cincinnati Bengals. You get a floor raiser in Caleb Downs and then another one in Amari Washington, who, yes, they drafted Chris Jenkins a couple years ago, but he was sub 300 pounds, and it just hasn't really come together at the next level for him as a run defender. Amari Washington is an NFL-ready run defender who moves 330. Same thing I said about Lee Hunter, like 330, 325 ain't supposed to move that way. But Washington does it even more laterally than I will say Hunter does. Hunter has great vertical speed, straight line motion. Washington has some of that, not quite to the same degree as Hunter, but he's really light on his feet for someone who's 330 and can read and react and bounce around on the line of scrimmage based on where the ball carrier is. So really fun player, but this is the run defense reinsurance that the Bengals desperately need in the middle of that defensive line. And this will help keep guys like Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight clean. Plus, you add in Caleb Banks in the first round, we are absolutely raising the floor of this Bengals defense. All right, well, let's talk about these defensive tackles. Let's go ahead and get Lee Hunter off the board. Dude, watching him, I know they lost. And they got shut out this last weekend. But dude, if you watch Lee Hunter, I think it might have been the most impressive performance of any draft eligible prospect. So much so that James Foster actually, he did a top 10, top 11 most impressive draft prospect performances, and he had Lee Hunter at 1. Disruptive against the run, but again, 325, 330 should not move as explosive as it does and as quick as it does. And because of that, there's some nice pass rush reps under his belt as well. Now, it's just going to be interesting to see where he fills in a rotation with, a Brian Brzee, who is a really nice pass rusher. At least as a prospect, I was hopeful for his pass rush production. I think the production's been better than the actual on-field tape, but that's another discussion for another day. Saints fans like to fight me on how good Brian Brzee is. But either way, he needs a running mate, specifically in run defense, and I do think Lee Hunter brings that right away. But I'd be curious to see how soon is Lee Hunter one of the more disruptive pass rushers from the inside. I'd be curious. I don't think it'll take too long. But if you've watched this Texas Tech D-line, again, I know they got shut out last week, but if you watched even this last week where they got shut out and lost, you watch that D-line, that's a D-line where you want dudes on your team at the next level, right? So Lee Hunter going to the New Orleans Saints at 42. All right, then at 43, I'm going to give the Dolphins, they need a receiver, and I know he's got the torn ACL right now, but Chris Bell kind of still fits in with what Mike McDaniel wants, right? Like speed and explosiveness, Chris Bell's got that and then some. Now you do need to refine the route running and whatnot, but I think Waddle could be the X, and then Chris Bell kind of slides into that, getting him into motion, freeing him up off the line of scrimmage, and taking advantage of him having a head start with his athletic profile. Feels a little bit like a cheat code. And you could also develop him just because he is 6'1", 227. He has an X receiver body type and physicality. You could still cross-train him up on that, while Waddle has proven to be a very good flanker and slot option too. So like this to get you back to that 1-2 punch, because I do like Malik Washington, but I think he's definitely he's a nice receiver 3 than he is like, oh my God, that guy's definitely a receiver 2. Hopefully that makes sense. So draft Chris Bell, let him get back to 100%. Washington then slots back into that receiver 3 role. And I think things fall back into place as they should in Miami. And then you got to figure out the quarterback position. Let me just throw it out there. I know everyone wants Malik Willis right now. I hope Malik Willis is in Miami. Willis plus Bell plus Waddle plus Washington. Yes, that would make me so happy. I'm not even a Dolphins fan. Anyways, staying in the AFC East, this is where I'm going to have Josiah Trotter come off the board, top 100 pick. And honestly, there were multiple times I wanted to get him off the board earlier. Again, coverage is still a bit of a TBD. Redshirt sophomore, so on the younger side, still figuring out that. But you want to talk about violence and downhill tenacity. Josiah Trotter's got it in abundance. And I love watching him when it comes down to triggering downhill, wrapping up a tackle and making a play. Only 7 missed tackles this entire season with him at the center of it all for that Missouri defense. Big time fan of Josiah Trotter. Love the athlete, love the violence, TBD and coverage, but everything else, yes, absolutely. And this is, a middle linebacking core that, with Quinton Williams gone, I can see where Quincy Williams is gone this offseason for the Jets. Don't foresee him wanting to stick around. And you got Jeremy Sherfield, who's a fine player, but I think there's definitely a higher ceiling to be had. And I think Trotter can be that thumper and enforcer that Glenn Allen's looking. Like I said earlier, gave him Keith Adney because they need a dog. Who could be that dude who's the dog in the middle of the defense? Josiah Trotter definitely got that type of personality. Let's get to the Baltimore Ravens here at 45, and the run for TJ Parker ends. And this is really, I didn't mean for this to be like a I hate TJ Parker mock draft, but it's just good edge center, plays the run, it wins with power. That's really fun. But sometimes when you do these mocks, it's just, and it's not fair, but that's just not sexy, and it's hard to find where you want to slot that in. In reality, probably should have still gone late first round, or maybe he could have been the Chiefs pick a little bit earlier on here in the second round. But that being said, man, maybe it's the 49ers, but they just kind of drafted a guy in Michael Williams where it's like good run defender, has good power and length. So already got that role filled kind of. And, the 49ers, Houston have awesome pass rushers. The Browns are the best one in football, and a couple other guys who fit in really well there. The Rams have a great rotation of edge rushers. Maybe the Patriots, so maybe him instead of Blake Miller. But even then, it feels like, you could, but you don't need to either. So I haven't come off the board here for the Baltimore Ravens, who, funnily enough, now also got Peter Woods at 14, if my memory is so. Yep, Peter Woods. So we get Peter Woods and TJ Parker. Wasn't necessarily planning that, but Parker does feel like a guy who you could throw in right away. Kyle Van Noy's this nice, he's poor man's Andrew Van Ginkel at this point, where he's this hybrid edge rusher, dropping a coverage guy. I think you can get into a spot where it's Mike Green at one side. He's definitely a DPR type, so Van Noy will still get some snaps, but Mike Green on third and longs, pinning his ears back, winning with speed and bend and athleticism, with TJ Parker then on the other side, who can, pin his ears back and load up into an offensive tackle's chest. So they do feel like they complement each other pretty well once you get into those third and obvious passing situations for the Ravens. And, They just lost the Steelers. I think this is a team that, especially down the last month of the season, felt like their lack of pass rush just became more and more glaring every time I watched them. So wanted to give them some reinforcements there, and they get a guy who could have gone to the first round, kind of shades of last year, right? Mike Green fell into their lap for other reasons. Here's just a disappointing season that sends TJ Parker to pick 45. All right, next up, pick 46. Let's give the Tampa Bay Buccaneers some interior offensive line reinforcements in Austin Searveld. This could be a guy who goes back to school and maybe even plays guard at Ohio State. Wouldn't shock me. But it's specifically when you look at his guard simulated reps where he plays left tackle for Ohio State, but there's a tight end next to him. Those reps in specific are ones where I'm like, yeah, make this guy guard. Like those almost solidify my feelings even more so than like when he just plays offensive tackle. But when he does play offensive tackle and someone goes against his outside shoulder, those are good reminders too that this guy's probably a guard. But yeah, that left guard spot is definitely a position of need for the Bucs and a position they can get better at. So plug and play guy here, and a guy who played a ton of football and good football this last year at Ohio State. Plug him in there at left guard in Tampa. Pick 47, Indianapolis Colts. I'm going to give you Mateo Uiagalelei. At this point, like Kwity Paye is just he hasn't turned the corner yet as a pass rusher. No reason to think that it's just going to magically happen. So where Leatu Latu has figured it out, becoming a really nice technical pass rusher. Let's go give them the other end of that, where it's like Mateo Uiagalelei, I think right now wins more with his traits and his repertoire and his technical refinement. But that's kind of what makes me kind of excited that they have this one physical monstrosity built in the lab to play NFL edge rusher. On the other side, guy who has solid measurables, okay athlete, but it's just an absolute technician. How much can that technician rub off on Uiagalelei and give us maybe the perfect, second round pick of what the Colts are looking for here? Or how much does that just complement one another and allow you to play mismatch? Hey, this guy struggles with big physical edge rushers. Okay, Mateo, that's going to be your matchup. Hey, this guy, like Trey Hendrickson against Broderick Jones, like one of the most technical edge rushers in football against one of the least technically refined offensive tackles in football in Broderick Jones. It was just a mismatch that was never going to go well for Broderick Jones. And in that case, you would put, let's say, Leatu Latu on Broderick Jones because refined technician versus unrefined technician. So it just gives you some mismatch there options for the Indianapolis Colts and allows you to turn the page and move on from Kwity Paye once he does hit free agency. All right, Atlanta Falcons, this is one of my absolute favorite fits. Obviously, new head coach comes in. I felt like that was a little bit of a rough rub there for Raheem Morris, but once I saw they fired Terry Fontenot, that's what clicked it into place, that they fired the GM, so therefore they fired the head coach as well. They didn't want to do another one of these limbos where, hey, you're inheriting this guy, we'll give it a year and see how it goes. I do think the defense took a big step forward this last year, and Morris could have at least earned the opportunity to hire a different OC from Zach Robinson, who I still think can do things well and could maybe be a successful play caller elsewhere. But, I think it was time for a change there in Atlanta. And I kind of wish Morris could have gotten that opportunity. But doesn't, and he's going to move on and he'll be a great DC in Washington or, somewhere thereabout pretty soon. But anyways, Atlanta Falcons, I know they're looking for a new, probably offensive-minded head coach. I think Kevin Stefanski would be an absolute home run fit there. So I'm going to give him Jeremy Bedard. They just need that guy, that compliment. And, dude, I look at Jeremy Bernard, and so much of what I see is Juju Smith-Schuster his first couple of years with the Steelers, where Antonio Brown's going up for 12, 13, 14, 1,500-yard seasons, and he's so good you can't play man coverage. But Juju Smith-Schuster on the other side was a great run blocker. Absolutely could find the soft spots in zone coverage. Made the tough grabs up in the middle of the field you needed him to make to move the chains. And he was good enough against man that when you did run man, he could get open often enough. He was the perfect complement next to a absolute dog who was Antonio Brown in his prime. Jeremy Bernard gives me a lot of those vibes, where he just does a lot of things really well. He's the ultimate complimentary receiver. And I think Drake London's a dog. And I think you could keep Darnell Mooney around as that field stretching type, because that's the one thing neither one of these guys, London or Bernard, have is like elite sub 4.4 speed. So if you can keep Mooney around as a burner or find someone else to be that burner, I think Bernard plus London, those are two highly refined complements to one another. And Bernard's skills and refinement are NFL ready. Like, this guy can absolutely step on the field and be a receiver too, day one. And that's a nice luxury to have here at 48. Again, we're getting to the bell curve of the draft, where there's a lot of value that lines up with where these teams are picking, more so than where the teams 1 through 6 are picking, we'll say. All right, next up, the Minnesota Vikings here at 49. I'm going to go with Jonah Coleman. I've gone with Jeremiah Love and a couple of the first-round knocks for the Minnesota Vikings. I'll have to go with a different position of need and then wait for a running back to come their way. And while Coleman's definitely not as explosive as Jeremiah Love, he's explosive enough. He can break off some big runs, but he's very light on his feet. He's 228 pounds. In a lot of ways, he feels like between his ability to be lighter on his feet than you would think, that kind of the Aaron Jones component of his game, but then he's 228 pounds. Good Lord, he's a hammer. That's almost the Jordan Mason, combination of his game. So it always feels like Jonah Coleman's the mix of the two guys they had in that backfield this year. But he's also a really nice pass protector and a more than comfortable pass catcher. This is a guy that I think is very easy to get on the field for 3 downs, and I do think it's time for a new page, a new chapter there in the backfield in Minnesota, and I think Coleman gives them their bell cow of the future. Next up is pick 50. I'm going to go with R. Mason Thomas here for the Lions. Just looking for more juice off the edge, and R. Mason Thomas brings it and then some. And honestly, 50 probably feels like as about as low as he's going to go in most of these mocks, but great first step, can get through the chest of a tackle. The run defense is, not all world, but it's fine enough. And even just as a DPR, like once you get in 3rd and 13, when you're down 10 points to this great Lions offense, and you have to deal with Hutchinson and R. Mason Thomas, I mean, offense is going to be pulling their hair out right there. So that's why you do this move, even if he's not the world's greatest run defender. All right, back to the Carolina Panthers. Going to go back to the edge well here. And I'm not like writing the ship on Princely Umanmielen. I know they took him and Scorton. Scorton's been the better of the 2 rookies. But Romello Height, and look, I know he's on the older side too, for sure. But 22.2% pass rush win rate for a defensive line that's still looking for more pass rush wins. Need I say more? So this is a proven, polished pass rush winner. He's just going to be a DPR. But even in that, I think he brings some value there for that Carolina front. All right, next up, Green Bay Packers. And I'm going to go back to the corner well now and go with Julian Neal. Maybe a little high. Maybe I'd like him a little bit more in that 60 to 64 range if I'm going to take him in the second round. But big, long, athletic corner. We're going to get to see the Senior Bowl, and he could have that Darian Porter type of rise, right? And like Porter still ultimately went round 3, but wouldn't shock me if Neal is this type of, this year's Darian Porter. Love the athlete, love the size, love him in press coverage. And he's got good ball skills to go with it too. So if this team can maintain Jeff Hafley as that DC, I think he'll look at Julian Neal and the size, the athleticism, and the ball skills and see a guy who can fit in there right away. Let's get back to Pittsburgh Steelers. We went Ty Simpson in the first round, and there were a lot of receivers I thought about here, but Brazel works the vertical plane. Jacoby Lane works the vertical plane. You already got DK Metcalf for that. So I was looking for a guy who could be a little bit more nuanced, who could be basically a better version of what they wanted Roman Wilson to be as that complementary guy. So you got DK on the vertical plane, and ultimately the guy I settled on was Omar Cooper Jr. Explosive route runner, works the middle of the field, makes tough grabs, great body control. You saw it evident on that game-winning touchdown in that Penn State walk-off drive where it gets the feet down, just goes limp, honestly, and just lets the feet touch the ground, gets them in before he goes out of bounds. So that's the type of complimentary receiver I think that's the flavor they're looking on top of DK Metcalf, right? You have the spicy food. We'll call DK Metcalf spicy food. What's the little sweet that goes with it? And I think that's Omar Cooper Jr. in this analogy. All right, let's get on to pick 54, and let's give the Philadelphia Eagles Joshua Josephs. We give him Kenyon Sadiq in the first round. Edge, this feels like one of the weaker years when it comes to edge rotation and pass rush winning for this Eagles D-line that we always think of this vaunted presence who just ass kicker after ass kicker. This year, maybe not quite as much. I think Joshua Josephs would be a nice add in that, specifically his length. I think he would play really, really well into that mix. But also, this would be a great team to have TJ Parker go to. He'd be a great Brandon Graham replacement. So a lot of different options there at the edge rusher well. Or Mateo Uiagalelei, right? Like they have a great track record to develop these edge rushers. Uiagalelei, that would be a nice little hand and glove fit. But decided to go with Josh Joseph and his length here on that D-line in Philly. All right, back to the Chargers here at 55. And this might be a little early for me, but I did want to go with someone there on the defensive line. This team feels like it's missing, Poona Ford after he went cross town and went to play for the Rams. So this just lumbering, two-gapping, big body, physical, run-stopping presence in the middle of the D-line, and that is the Godfather, Dante Corleone. Battled with some blood clots, but when he's on the football field, especially this year, he's been rock solid at exactly that, stuff in the run. So let's get him in the middle of that defensive line in Los Angeles. Back to the Bills. This is one of my absolute favorite values and fits. Dylan Thieneman. I do think alongside Cook, who's the safety for, not Cook, Cole Bishop, who's had a really nice year, former Utah safety. Feels like the Bills have figured out the best place to use him and let him be a playmaker. Still need another guy as that other safety, right? Like, you think about Sean McDermott, you think about those split safety looks. So who's the other guy on that split? Dylan Thieneman has gotten so many more opportunities at Oregon, right? At Purdue, it's pretty much all single high free safeties playing center field. At Oregon, he's done a lot more split safety looks, and they've had him play in the box from time to time. And ever since he got that pick against Penn State, he's been nails. He's been absolutely lights out, both from a tackling standpoint, but also being a playmaker in coverage, but also not doing too much to try to take the bait. That was one of my knocks on him at Purdue, where he's playing single high free safety. And sometimes teams would know that guy's willing to take chances, and he's got a lot of picks because of it, but we can also make him take the cheese. And this year he's cut back on those while still being a playmaker on the back end. So love Dylan Thieneman to the Buffalo Bills there at 56. Let's get the Bears at 57. I'm going to actually go to the safety well again. And I'll admit here, hand up, I like A.J. Halsey. But I'm not nearly as high as him as Trev is. I would probably go Kamari Ramsey or Emmanuel McNeil Warren over him. Might even go Zakai Wheatley over it. But what I will say about A.J. Halsey, is this guy has a sixth sense for right place, right time, and punching the football loose. And who is the current defensive backs coach for the Chicago Bears? Who knows? Maybe he'll be a DC for the Washington Commanders because of his ties with Dan Quinn. But it's Al Harris. And when he's the DB coach in Dallas, all of a sudden they start becoming a turnover machine of a defense. Chicago Bears this year started turning teams over left, right, and center. One of the best teams in turnover margin. So if you're telling me Al Harris is there and you can give him a playmaking safety like AJ Halsey, sign me up for that. And I love Jaquan Brisker. I did want to throw that out there, but just with a concussion history, that's just kind of the same thing I said about earlier with Chris Olave. Just a little bit of a yellow flag there, just something to monitor. And also towards the end of his rookie contract. So just naturally might be a time to pass the torch on. Let's get on to the Houston Texans here at 58. Running back's the one position we haven't really addressed yet. So I'm going to go with Jadarian Price. My RB3 right now at the moment. Love him between the tackles. Very bouncy, good contact balance, and enough athleticism to spring the big play, both on the offensive side, but as a returner. And we saw that multiple times this year for Notre Dame. So I think he fits zone, gap, you name it. He can fit that running style. But I think especially in a Nick Haley gap scheme, let this guy be a physical north-south runner. Yeah, sign me up for that. So this is the running back of the future in that Houston backfield. All right. Next up, let's go with the San Francisco 49ers. So real quick, I had Zion Young written down as the pick, but the more I sit with it, I'm like, yeah, well, you just drafted Michael Williams last year, and I almost do think, do you go Jennings Dunker? I'm just not the world's biggest Jennings Dunker guy. Maybe it's Carter Smith. Maybe Carter Smith's the pick here. I just think there's a world where I think I might, or is it just Brian Parker the second? We're going to play him at center. I'm going to go with Brian Parker the second. 59, I'm going to call a pivot here. I was going to go Zion Young, the edge rusher out of Missouri, but I'm going to go with Brian Parker the second and say that's your center of the future in San Francisco. Left guard or center? I think this is the year where you finally make it happen. Also, Colton McKivitz, an expiring deal at right tackle, so maybe it's that. Maybe Blake Miller falls in your lap, but I do think offensive line is going to have to be one of these first two picks. And here I'm just going to say it's Brian Parker the second, right tackle for Duke, but he's going to be a center at the next level, and I think he's going to be a very good one. And right now, behind Connor Lew is my next best center. So plug and play started there for the 49ers and a great fit in that wide zone blocking scheme. Next up, the Jags here at 60. I'm going to go with the previously mentioned safety, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, another Senior Bowl guy. I believe maybe he's a Shrine Bowl guy, but he's going to go to one of those all-star events. But, man, this guy is a big, physical, lanky safety with great range and coverage, but also, like, get this guy in the box. Like, this guy is a playmaker when it comes to punching the football loose. And with his body type, he is just an absolute tight end eraser waiting to be used that way. And I also do wonder, you look at like Kyle Hamilton as a slot player, Nicky Manwari is a slot player. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren with his length and athleticism could be a really frustrating slot player for opposing offenses. So I don't want to rule that out either. So it might be a guy you see in my slot rankings once we get to the end of the cycle. But the safety plays just got to get better in Jacksonville. One of the few spots on that roster where I'm like, yeah, they could definitely use an upgrade there. Rams are next here at 61. And Rams fans, I'll be honest, I didn't know what to do here. I really didn't. We've already gone with, to me, your biggest needs, right tackle and corner. So I'm kind of going with the luxury pick here. Devontae Adams can't play forever. And one of the guys I was surprised to declare was Jacoby Lane. What if we just kept him in state, kept him real local? And even if Devontae Adams does come back and play next year, that might be the best thing possible for Jacoby Lane. So I know we're kind of drafting and statching him because I do think Devontae Adams can be back for another year in LA. But what a wide receiver room for Jacoby Lane to work from Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. And then in the event that one of the two gets injured, you're getting a really talented receiver who, again, not going to run the most sexy 40, but does a lot of little things right and really moves well after the catch. So like the bowl skills, big body that can work in the red zone and solid enough after the catch to be used as a weapon there. And that's not to write off Kenyatta Mumfield or Tutu Atwell or anything like that. I just think this could be your eventual Devontae Adams successor here at 61. And we've already hit their biggest areas of need. This is a great roster. So I'm just kind of picking best player available and what's a fun luxury pick here at 61. All right, here at 62, for the New England Patriots, I'm going to go edge. And I've talked to a couple of Patriots fans about it, and I don't know the exact edge rusher they might be looking for, but Akeem Mesidor, this guy who might be able to fold inside, he's listed at 280. I think he's going to be closer to 270 once we get to the combine. But this guy who can, one, as productive a pass rusher on the outside that we've seen in college football this year. Yes, he's 25, so he's on the older side, but because of that, I feel very confident that he can be a day one contributor as a pass rusher. And the fact that he's got a bigger body type, in obvious passing situations, he becomes a guy that you can fold inside and rush more over guards and don't have to force him outside of tackles, whatever the case may be. So some inside-out flexibility there. I wonder if that's enough to move Mesidor onto the Patriots' radar. And I just think about guys like Keon White who had those bigger body types and were kind of flexible on the D-line. I just think about what they might want. But also I'm trying to think back to what like Vrabel coveted in Tennessee. So Pats fans, let me know what you're thinking there out of the edge group, or what you would do differently here at 62. I'm curious what you guys are seeing as needed. It's tough when you have this up and coming emerging team where everything's awesome and everyone wants to sing Kumbaya, but then you're like, all right, well, where do they need to get better? And specifically here 62, that was a spot where I kind of struggled with the Patriots. 2 more picks to do, and let's get you out of here. Denver Broncos, the Evan Ingram experiment hasn't worked. I don't know where Michael Trigg's going to come in on my final tight end rankings. He's not the world's greatest athlete. He's got like literally a 0% separation score, but he's one of the most productive contested catch guys that we've seen in college football this year, and an absolute red zone weapon. And you look at the schools he's played for in his college career, all insane pedigree. But the fact that he's played for what I think 4 college football teams now, if not 4, it's 3. And it's all been kind of character stuff. I don't want to be here. They don't, they're just not really meshing. There's a lot of conversations that need to be had there, and some personality quirks that may be red flags for teams for sure. But dude, if you're Sean Payton and you're looking for Jimmy Graham, contested catch, red zone, machine, jump ball, go get it, I point you in the direction of Michael Trigg coming out of Baylor. And then we get to our last pick here in the Seattle Seahawks. This was not necessarily, I think, the biggest position of need. It is on PFF for linebacker being a position of need. I think they could wait to go do it, but this guy is too good of a football player to get out of the second round. I'm going to go with Jake Golday, another one of these guys who's going to be at one of the senior all-star events. I believe the Senior Bowl, but he might be the Shrine Bowl. But he was just awesome. Actually, he is the Shrine Bowl. Remember Renner tweeting about him. But Mike Renner, friend of the show, who also helped put together the Shrine Bowl reports and scouting reports this year. But anyways, Golday is such a good player in the box, sure tackler, but moves really well given he's 6'4" and close to 250 too. So prototypical linebacker build, but with really nice athleticism, and he's fearless coming downhill and a very sure tackler as well. But with all that done, that's 64 picks in. I wanted to showcase each and every one of them one more time to you all. Let me know who went too high, who went too low, who's your favorite squad, and what do you think of the haul that I gave your squad? Going to try to respond to all the YouTube comments that I possibly can, but also did want to plug in one more time. Great time to subscribe to 32 Beat Writers over at 32beatwriters.com. And I'd love to have you come join us for our live prospect breakdown starting this Wednesday. At the worst, it's going to be Thursday, but it sounds like it's going to be this Wednesday with the feedback I gotten from everyone in our chat. So would love to see you there. Love to talk ball with you. And of course, I'd love to see you talking ball down below in the comments or in a reply back to this post on X or even in my DMs if you want to give me a follow on Twitter at TJ Wengert, spelled Wengert. Because that is going to do it for this first 2-round mock draft of the 2026 draft cycle. Let me hear your thoughts on these picks down below. Like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already. Tons more draft content and then fantasy football content right behind it here on the channel. And of course, do us one more favor. If you're still listening, hit the hype button. Go down in the comments, swipe over once, maybe twice. Hit hype. It's the new YouTube algorithm thing that they're pushing out, and it would really help me, the channel, and 32 Beat Writers as a whole out if you could just take 2 seconds to do that. Thank you so much. I'm done asking for favors. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name's Teach. We are signing off.